Hey YouTube, I'm here to you today about a card game called Netrunner, Android Netrunner specifically. You're less likely to have heard of that than, say, Magic the Gathering, which is a very popular card game. If you haven't heard of Magic the Gathering, this whole vlog thing I'm doing here probably isn't really going to do much for you. So maybe go look up card games that nerds play. Anyway, so going into this with the assumption that you know what Magic is and probably know at least a little bit about how to play, Android Netrunner has really impressed me, and in the, I guess it's been maybe 2-ish years now that it's been out, I haven't played a lot of other games. Like, I mean, obviously I still play some board games, I still play a little Magic, but it's captured my interest in a way that I don't think any other game has. You know, every other game I've gotten into, I go through kind of waves with. You know, I'll get back into it and maybe stick with it for a few months, maybe even half a year, but eventually my interest will kind of wane and I'll, you know, pick up interest in something else, and maybe I'll come back to that first thing, but, you know, it's always kind of a back and forth. With Netrunner, I've been consistently playing this game since it came out. You know, we've had a league going at my store, and I've just played in every single month of the league. You know, all of them. And part of the reason I think that it has captured my attention so much more than Magic, for instance, and it's easy to compare the two because they are both card games and both designed by Richard Garfield, but the reason I think that Netrunner has so much more, in my opinion, is the amount of decision-making and strategy in every single turn. And rather than, you know, explain the rules, because there are lots of videos on YouTube explaining the rules, I want to kind of make a comparison and tell you about how Magic would look if it had the same level of decision-making that Netrunner does. And I have done some thinking on the process, and this might actually be a fun variant of Magic. I don't know if it would be balanced or actually, like, really function very well, but it'd be interesting to try. So imagine in Magic, if every turn you get 4, let's call them actions. And by default, you can, you know, still do all the things you normally do, but the following phases are limited. Okay, so in the untap phase, if you spend an action, then you get to untap everything like normal. If you don't spend an action, then you basically skip your untap phase. Nothing untaps. Alright, so then you get to your draw phase. In your draw phase, if you don't spend any actions, you don't draw anything. If you do spend actions, you can spend as many actions as you like to draw 1 card per action. Alright, so we're already a huge difference. You could just spend all 4 of your actions right there and just draw 4 cards. Most Magic players, that's like insanity right there. But there's, you know, it continues. So you get to your main phase, and during your main phase, you can't play any lands, but you can spend actions to allow you to play 1 land per action. Again, you know, this is like completely mind-boggling to an average Magic player, being able to play, like, you know, 3 or 4 lands in a turn just by giving up some of the other things you're doing in your turn. And finally, at the end of your main phase, if you have any actions left, you can spend an action to have a combat phase, which will be followed by another main phase. And you can do that as many times as you like at the end of your main phases. So if you don't spend any actions, then you just have one main phase, and you don't get a combat phase at all. But if you decide to spend all your actions on combat phases, for whatever reason, there might be a really good reason to do that, then you could have 4 combat phases that turn. But you'd be giving up your draw for the turn, your untapping of anything, and your ability to play any land. Now, this makes the very first turn of Magic have some decisions to be made. First turn of Magic, you usually don't need to untap because you don't have anything in play yet, so obviously there's nothing tapped. Also, the first turn of Magic, depending on your deck, you probably don't need a combat phase because most of your creatures that you play that turn will have Summoning Sickness. So there's 2 actions right there that you can just, siphon into whatever you want. Maybe you want to draw a card and play 3 land. And it just changes how many decisions are made, even from the very first turn of Magic, which, there are formats where there are decisions to be made on the first turn of Magic, but in just an average, standard or especially limited game of Magic, your first turn, you draw a card, you kind of decide which land to play, maybe, you play that land, and then if you have something you can play that only costs 1 mana or less, you play that. And, that's your first turn. There's not a lot of thinking going on. But in Netrunner, there is a lot of thinking going on right from the first turn, especially for the runner. There's a little bit less on the other side of the table, but, you have 4, they call them clicks, which are basically just like the actions I described, except less limited. Magic, the turn structure is kind of important. But, you can spend a click to draw a card. You can spend a click to gain a credit, which is like mana, except that your mana pool doesn't empty. But it also doesn't, there's no recurring land other than just, you can click for one. You have to click in Netrunner to play a card. So at most, you're playing 4 cards a turn with very few exceptions. And usually it's less than that. So unlike Magic, where, you're limited by your card draws, your, land for the turn, and that sort of thing, in Netrunner, you're just limited by how many things you can do, not how many of those things you can do. And it ends up making for a really interesting game. It is also interesting because, as I briefly mentioned before, there's the 2-sidedness, which I might get into in a later video. This one's already running longer than my political video because, games are much more important. But yeah, it's a very interesting game with a lot to offer, and you should definitely check it out. There is a way to play it online, but I do not at all recommend that for your first game or 2. It's a very difficult interface to use. You really just need to either buy the core set, watch some videos, tutorial videos online, and, figure the game out, because, again, the rulebook, it's not as helpful as it should be. It's a great reference, but not a fantastic teaching tool. So, yeah, find some videos of people, tutorials online of how to play. Get yourself some cards, or find a friend who has some cards. Because, yeah, obviously the best way to learn it is for a friend to teach you. And then try it out. It is an amazing game. The core set, you can get it for $32 online. I think it retails at $40. And obviously I'm wearing this shirt here, so maybe you should check out our website. But not to plug, the place I work. Play this game. It's super awesome. Alright, that's all I got for today. Under 10 minutes is probably good, so we'll do that. See you next time.